I'm Tom Jacobson. I'm up in Fremont County. I'm the extension educator up there. And for the past 3 years since I've been in extension, I've done a lot of soil testing. And I think it's a really good practice for homeowners just to get a really good baseline of what they're dealing with in their garden. And it just helps to make a good helps you to start making good management decisions. And so today we're going to talk about soil testing. We're going to talk about how to do those soil tests and where to send it and how to interpret those. And hopefully we'll be able to discuss a little bit of, if you've got some issues, how we can try to fix those. So let's talk about why soil testing matters. There's a lot of reasons. The first, I think probably one of the most important things is we want to maximize plant growth and yield. And getting a good soil test helps you to do that. And we'll talk a little bit more about how we can maximize our plant growth and yield today. Also, preventing over and under fertilization. This is a big deal for home gardeners. If you can save money on fertilization or spend the money on the correct fertilization, that's a big bonus as well. Managing your soil pH for nutrient availability. We're going to talk a little bit about pH and what that means and how that soil pH can impact nutrient availability. We'll talk about why a soil test can identify some deficiencies, or if you've got too much of a nutrient in your soil, it can also be toxic to the plants. And so we'll talk about that a little bit as well. As if we can get a good soil test, we can understand, there's some soil health issues that we can fix based on what that soil test says. And so we'll look at that as well. And we want to reduce the impact that we have on the environment. And so having a good soil test can improve maybe our water, the nutrients that get into the water and runoff situations and things like that. We want to save money and resources. There's no need to put extra nutrients on your garden and in your lawn and things like that. So we'll talk about all of those things. And the main idea is we want to have long-term sustainability in our gardens, in our lawns. We want to make those the soil the healthiest we can. And so getting a good baseline of what is in our soil can really make a big difference. We're going to talk about 4 of our main soil issues, and we can talk about how soil testing or how we can identify some of these issues with soil testing. And so we'll talk about the pH imbalances. If you look at this raspberry plant, we can see iron chlorosis, and it's not necessarily meaning that that plant doesn't have iron. It may have plenty of iron, but the pH, makes that nutrient, that iron, unavailable to the plant. And so we see that chlorosis happening in those leaves. We can talk about nutrient deficiency. We can see these corn plants over here. There's some things going on there that if you can identify those early, then we don't see those nutrient deficiencies. Also low organic matter. I tried to find a sandy soil or a soil that had very little organic matter, and we can kind of see that here. And then also salinity issues. If we look at this soil, it's got that hard white crust on top of that soil. A lot of times that's the well, that's a salinity issue, and plants just can't grow in salt. And so we'll talk about how we can stop these problems before they become, or stop these issues before they become problems with a good soil test. So there's some basic things that you're going to need to get a good soil test. Um, I send my soil test down to the Utah State Analytical Laboratories down in Logan, just because of the price. It's a pretty inexpensive test that you can do. They have a variety of tests that you can do for your soil. If you're in or close to Twin Falls, Stukenholtz Labs is also a great place. A little bit more expensive, but maybe by the time you get that to their lab, they're going to have those test results to you really quickly. So um, those are a few of the places that you can go. There's a lot of places that you can send soil. Um, but the biggest thing that we want to do is we want to be random and get a random sample of the soil that you want to test. If you get all of the soil from one spot in your yard, you may end up with a sample that just isn't representative of the rest of your yard. And so uh, this diagram down at the bottom, there's there's several ways that you can do it. I kind of like this zigzag approach when I do a soil test. I'm just going to go throughout the whole field. I'm going to use this soil probe right here. And a lot of your extension offices will have several soil probes you can check out and use to uh, get your samples. And you're going to get these core samples out of your soil. I would suggest going down 6 to 8 inches deep in your in your garden. If you are doing your lawn, go anywhere from 4 to 6 inches at minimum. But you're going to go through, excuse me, you're going to go through the whole uh, area that you want to sample and that you're going to be getting your sample from and get a really good representative sample. And so I'm going to use that probe and I'm going to stick all of those soil cores in a bucket. Make sure your bucket's clean. I tell people you got to make sure that the soil probe is clean before you use it. You don't want to have any cross contamination with other soil before you start sampling. Excuse me. And you're just going to mix that in a bucket. The soil lab at Utah State only requires 2 cups. And so I'm going to take once I get that in the bucket, I'm going to mix it up really good. I'm going to try to break up all those soil cores and just really mix it really good. And then I'm going to take 2 cups out of that bucket and put those in a Ziploc bag. Label that bag with what it is, where you took that sample, fill out my soil testing paperwork, and get it to the post office or however you're sending that as quickly as you can. You don't want to have that soil sitting around very long. Definitely don't just throw that Ziploc bag on your windshield or on your dashboard as you jump in your pickup or in your car. You want to try to keep it as cool as you can, and that will be as representative as you can with that sample throughout the process. And so anyways, you're going to want to get that sent and shipped off down to the lab as soon as you can. And this website right here has the testing form. You fill out all the things that you're going to need, you want tested. And they have a basic test. I think it's $25. And when I suggest people get a soil test, I have them it's a $65 test, and it tests all your macronutrients as well as your micronutrients. And you just get a little bit more information. And the first time you do a soil test, That's what you want to just get a baseline of what your property is at that point in time. Okay, so after you send it off, Utah State's really good about getting your results back usually within a week. They say on their website 7 to 10 business days, but I've never seen them take that long to do that. Anyways, this is what your test result is going to look like, and we'll look at that a little bit more in detail here in the next few slides. But there's some key components that we're going to see on the soil test report. The first one is your soil pH. And soil pH is very important, but that's going to be listed on the Utah State form that they send back to you. It'll have what it's measuring. The second column will be what it measured, and then it'll have an interpretation for you, whether it's normal, low, very low, adequate, and then it'll have recommendations for how to amend or how to fertilize your property. So the recommendations are based on the results. So if I need to amend my pH, it will have that recommendation, what you should amend that with. If there's if we can look at fertilization strategies, if there's multiple ways to get the nutrients that you need in your garden. You can do it organically or synthetically, but this gives us a good idea on what we should be adding. And then if we need to amend our soil at all, that will be there as well. So rather than go through each of these, I've got them on the next slides, and so we can see that a little bit more closely. So here's the top of that test report. It's going to have the date they received it, the date that they completed it and sent it out to you. It'll have your contact information. It'll have the lab, the identification that you give that. So you're going to write that on your test report, and you're going to also write that on the Ziploc bag that you send them. You're going to indicate what kind of crops you're trying to grow, whether it's shrubs, trees, garden, vegetable garden. It might be your lawn, whatever you are trying to do. You can indicate what, maybe if you're having specific issues, you can indicate that on the test result. So all of this stuff here is basically the information that you give them so that they can adequately give recommendations. Okay, the next part of the test results. So one of the most important things that we're going to find on there is the soil texture. And if we get a good random sample from your property, we should have a pretty good idea of what your soil texture is. And that's really important for water holding capacity, for drainage issues, for nutrient availability, or there's a lot of things that's important for. And if we know what the soil texture is, there's some things that we can do to improve that. So like, for example, this test result has clay loam, and we might want to incorporate more organic matter so that we can get a little bit better drainage. The next thing is the pH, and most plants grow best between pH of 6 and 7.5. And so if we're at a 7.5, it's going to interpret that to be normal. And just pay attention to some of those things. Salinity is on here, and I've got a slide just on salinity. And then we're going to see our 3 macronutrients: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And it's going to tell you what you need. So like on this one, it says phosphorus is very low. And so it recommends that you need 2 pounds of phosphate per 10,000 square feet. So you're going to have to do a little math on your garden, figure out, or your lawn, and figure out how many square feet you have. And that's going to be the best way to apply the right amount of fertilizer to your property. Um, the potassium says it's adequate. And so it recommends that you're not going to add any potassium to your to the area. Almost always they're gonna say that you need to add nitrogen, and that's because nitrogen, it moves through the soil. It doesn't stick around, and so you're gonna almost always going to be needing to fertilize with nitrogen. But it tells you once again how much nitrogen that you should add. Okay, let's look at pH really quickly. pH, and I know a lot of you have taken the Master Gardener classes. You've probably seen this chart before, but I just want to reemphasize this. So up here at the very top, we see the pH scale and what that means. So down here towards a pH of 4, that's extremely acidic. Most soils in Idaho are not that, but we do have a few soils in Idaho that are extremely or very strong acidity. And then if we move up up the scale, we have a pH of very strong alkalinity, a pH of 9.5 to 10. We're not going to see a whole lot down here or here, which is a good thing. But we will see anywhere from 6, maybe up to 8, maybe 8.5 in our areas. And so what does this mean? So if I look at these, each of these are the nutrients, the essential nutrients that a plant needs. And so at a pH of 7, which is a neutral solution, we're going to see that nitrogen, because it's wide all the way from 6 to 8, is very available anywhere between a pH of 6 and 8. But as we get beyond that, it becomes less and less available. And we can see that on both ends of the nitrogen. Okay, phosphorus, as soon as you get to 6.5, it starts to become less available. And then once we get down to 6, it's not very available at all. And by the time we get down to this extreme acidity, those plants are not going to be able to take that up. And so potassium, once again, at a 6. But notice up here on the other end, it's going to stay available to that plant no matter what your alkalinity is. And so you can look at each of these, but one thing that I want to point out, and I showed the picture earlier of the raspberries that had iron chlorosis. Excuse me. And the reason that they have iron chlorosis is most of our soils in Idaho are really between a 7 and an 8 on the pH scale. And at that point, they're that plant is able to take in. Oh, sorry, I I should be talking about iron. So iron is where at a pH of 6, then iron becomes very available. So our raspberries, our blueberries, a lot of our berries love acidic soils. It's hard to grow small small fruit like raspberries and blueberries and in Idaho because our pH is so alkaline, and so that iron chlorosis, the iron is present in the soil, it just can't take it in. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. I want to make sure we get through everything. So if you need to amend your soil, there's a few things that you can do. So we always are going to amend our soil in the fall. That's the best time to do it. And so we want to make sure that's when we're amending our soil. If our soil is too alkaline and I want to bring that pH down, this chart kind of talks about that. So I can use a couple of products. I can use elemental sulfur, which is going to have a longer impact but it's going to take a little bit longer for that pH to adjust. And then there's also ammonium sulfate, which it works a lot faster, but it doesn't last as long. So there's a couple of options. But if my pH is an 8 and I want to get down to a 6.5 on the pH scale, that means I'm going to need to use 0.3 pounds of sulfur per 10 square feet to lower the pH to the recommended level. Okay. Sulfur, very similar to nitrogen, leaches through the soil. And so you're going to have to do this quite often. And our water in Idaho, because it moves through our soil, is also alkaline. And so unless you're willing to water your plants with distilled water, and it's always a battle to get those alkaline soils to stay acidic. If you have an acidic soil, we're doing some research right now, and we're doing this on agricultural fields. And so this line right here, the second bullet, if I want to bring our pH up from an acidic, I would suggest using 24.2, and that is pounds of lime per 10 square feet. And that has to be mixed into your soil. It needs to be tilled in. So that's kind of what we've found so far with that study, and that's going to help over a longer term than the trying to make your soil less alkaline, just because that lime doesn't leach through. So, all right, if to understand salinity, the ECE on there stands for electrical conductivity, and basically what we're looking for is where is that number? And I mean, we could go into what that means, but if what you need to know is if the salinity is below 2, you have nothing to worry about. There are some plants that are very sensitive to salt, and a lot of plants, most of our garden plants, are very sensitive to salt. Some of your landscape plants may be less sensitive, they may be more tolerant, but that's what those numbers mean. How do we fix salinity? We've got to wash that salt through the soil, and so it's going to take a lot of water, and you're going to try to leach that salinity out. Okay, real quick, we're going to look at the bottom half of that report, and these are your micronutrients. And notice some of these or most of these are needed in small amounts. Sulfur is needed a little bit larger amount, but it also gives those indications over here as well. If you need to apply micronutrients, there's some things that you can do. It also talks about your organic matter. Ideally, our organic matter should be around 5, and it'd be even better if it was up around 10%. And there's some things that we can do to help that. So, these three over here, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, they're macronutrients. They're the nutrients that we need in large amounts. Over here, we have our micronutrients, and the Association for Science or Soil Science has released a new definition of 4 nutrients, so that fertilizer companies can start using beneficial nutrients, and they're also needed in very small amounts, but they can influence flowering, and there's some really cool things, and that's just happened in the last month, I think. And so there's some new information out there, and the micronutrients, I would contact a fertilizer company to get your hands on some of those. Organic matter is really important. It helps to improve our soil structure, and soil structure is very good for our biological organisms in the soil, and so it's going to help with drainage. It's going to there's a lot of great things about organic matter and improving that soil structure. It enhances our water holding capacity. So if we have really a sandy soil and we apply or we can incorporate organic matter, that's going to help keep that soil wet longer. Organic matter provides essential nutrients. It supports beneficial soil microorganisms. It helps to reduce soil erosion and it helps regulate soil temperature. So there's a lot of great things there. So how do we do it? How can we increase that organic matter? Compost is a great way to do that. When do we apply compost? Always in the fall. And we let that compost work in over the winter and let the microbes in the soil help break that down. Using cover crops is a great way. I just talked to a lady up in Ashton. She hurt her, or I think she had a knee replacement, so she doesn't want to garden this year, but she knows that she needs to have some type of living roots in the soil. It's going to help with weeds and things like that. And so we talked about using a cover crop to help her get through the growing season this year. Applying aged manure. The aged is really important. We want to make sure that manure, if we're getting cattle manure or horse manure or whatever it is, it sits for at least a year before we put it on our garden. And the reason for that is the salinity. We don't want to add those salts that come from the manure. Mulch with organic materials is a great way to do that, and there's lots of organic materials that we can use. Incorporate crop residues. For a long time, we'd pull everything out of my garden and we'd take it to the dump, and now that's not something that we do. We make sure that everything that's coming off of my garden is going back into the garden. That we're not eating. And so reducing tillage can help with that. We can grow perennial plants that helps with our organic matter. And anyways, that's what I've got for you.
Okay, any questions for Tom or any other gardening questions burning on your brain cell today?
Yes, this is Brian Anderson. I had a soil test done last fall, early fall, and what came back on both my garden and also my raised beds is my phosphorus is very high. One of them measured 79 milligrams per kilogram, and the other was 310 milligrams per kilogram. Your thoughts?
I'm going to guess that you've used manure in both your garden and your raised beds.
Okay, I use compost. It's just
Compost.
strictly virtually grass and leaf clippings that I've composted down. And that would do the same thing. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe my soil test was not deep enough. I thought I had
Well,
put it down, but it maybe wasn't adequate. Maybe I needed to go really be conscientious of how far I do to take that sample.
Well, your phosphorus, it doesn't leach out. So
Okay.
once it's in your soil, it's going to be there until the plants take it out, or you have some runoff, and that water that's running through your garden takes it with it.
Okay.
So it's gonna always be there.
Is that a good thing? But just being too high?
You're probably better having it too high, but I would suggest not using any fertilizer that has that, and let those. You'll save a lot of money that way. They just don't need it.
So your phosphate can interfere with some of your other nutrient uptake, calcium being one of those. And so one thing that I've noticed is that soils that are high in phosphate, like yours 300 and whatever it was,
Yeah,
have a
310.
tendency to have blossom end rot in tomatoes, that kind of a thing. It'll interfere with your
Mhm.
calcium uptake into the plant. like Tom said, there's really not much you can do for the phosphate that's there. You definitely don't need to add any more phosphate. And adding organic matter will add phosphate. And so every time you add compost, it's kind of a two-edged sword. You have to be careful. If we're going to be adding lots of compost matter, we have to be very, very careful and watch that phosphate level. And so it can cause some nutrient availability problems. Zinc is another one that can be interfered with. Too much phosphorus, you can get zinc deficiencies.
Okay, and that's, I believe, what I'm seeing then. I had peppers there last year and they didn't do as well as I expected. It's probably because of imbalance.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thank
and like Tom said, if you've got some native soil there that you can kind of work into it, that might help to dilute the phosphate a little bit. But that even that 79 milligrams per kilogram, that's still pretty high. I mean, we're usually looking about 20 to 40, and 40 is really on the high side. So you're still quite high with that as
And,
far as the mineral components are concerned.
okay, all right. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And you guys got a bunch of questions in the chat too, starting with what are some good cover crops?
Oh, it depends on what you want to do. I always like to use a legume, some type of legume for a cover crop. You can use like field peas or something like that is great. Something that you can use that doesn't get very tall is like white clover, or a lot of people don't like having white clover because it can get into your lawn and can become weedy there. But white clover is a great plant because it fixes nitrogen, and it's just going to help your soil. So those are a couple of them that I like to use.
I like to add a little, I like Austrian winter peas.
Yep.
And and then some sort of a grass or some other plant. The variety of plants growing on there is going to be very helpful for your soil, beneficial for the soil.
Yeah.
I like the annual ryegrass late in the season, get that up and going, and it'll die out in the wintertime as an annual grass.
Yeah, there's some great brassicas, some mustards that you can use. Turnips are a great cover crop.
Daikon radishes.
Yeah.
So let's see, reduced tillage. Angie, I haven't tilled my garden for maybe this is my 5th year of not tilling my garden. Now, I guess you have to define tillage. Anytime you disturb the soil could be termed tillage. And so when we say reducing tillage, what typically we mean is we don't want to destroy the soil structure that builds up. We get that organic matter in there, you get the fungi in there and the bacteria, all the microorganisms there, and they pull that soil together into a structure. And when we start beating it with the tillage equipment, we beat that to pieces, especially with our garden or tillers. I spent a lot of time tilling my dad's 5,000 square foot garden with a front tine tiller, many hours beating that soil to pieces. But when we do that, it reduces some of the structure and the capabilities of our soil. And so I'm in the process of getting all my gardens set up into permanent beds, my vegetable garden into permanent beds, and I haven't tilled those for quite a while. And the interesting thing is that weed pressure is down, the plants do very well there. Very little fertilizer. If you've got good healthy soils, they'll collect a lot of that nutrient that you need. Now, we did talk a little bit when Brian was talking about when you harvest off from your garden, a lot of what you take, the fruit that you take off from your vegetable garden, if you're harvesting stuff off, you will remove some phosphate, but not a lot. And so that's why we get to the point where the farmers are out there and they're taking the straw off and they're taking the weed off and they're taking all that stuff. Well, they're removing a lot more of that phosphate from the soil. And so that's why a lot of times we see they have a deficiency of those nutrients. And so harvesting can reduce that or take that off. And so back to the tillage though, Angie, just don't till. That's one way to get by with it. Just don't till. And I avoid walking on the garden where, if it's wet at all, I really try to avoid walking in the soil and causing compaction that way. And, over the period of the winter with the freeze and thaw and the water movement, you look at that soil, I dug some up the other day in my garden, and there's big clods you could see the wormholes going through there. So there's good aeration in there. The soil just looks really good. So I'm becoming more and more of a proponent of not tilling because it saves me a lot of time and the soil seems to be healthier. So, okay, best filler for the bottom of an above ground planter before soil. Now, I am a strong proponent of getting to the native soil as quickly as possible, unless your native soil has serious problems. So if you are going to be growing in a raised bed, so you got these planters and you got your sides up 12 inches or 24 inches or whatever, putting something at the bottom of that as a filler is not good. You're limiting how far your roots can go. They're going to be stopped by that, and your water movement is going to be stopped by that change of texture. Then over time, say like for example, you get this hugelkultur and all this kind of stuff where you put in these logs and then you put some soil on top of it, and eventually that sinks down. So then you have to put some more soil on top of it. And yes, topsoil is expensive, but it's not nearly as expensive of trying to get a whole bunch of compost, real deep compost. That's really expensive. So if you have to have a raised bed for your back, or you've got really bad soil or something like that, well, that's one thing. But trying to put something in the bottom of that, just so that you don't have to put as much soil in there, as you're kind of defeating you want to have a deep root. And if you've got rocks down there, the first 12 inches or first 6 inches is rocks or logs or paper products or whatever the case may be, that stops that water movement. You get a perched water table and you have problems then. So you really should be getting down to that native soil as quickly as possible. Now, if you're trying to control weeds, the weeds are going to get there eventually anyway. I would not encourage putting woven weed barrier underneath that bed as well, because that will also restrict your root growth down into the bed, into the soil. There are other things we might have to do for controlling weeds. I don't like to spray if I don't have to. And we were just talking tonight, we've got a bunch of us, we're all over here in Boise right now. And we were talking about the new Roundup is not glyphosate in our home products. And so if you get onto East Idaho News, read Bracken Henderson's newest post, talks about what the new Roundup has in it. So make sure that you know the chemistry of what it is you're putting out, because that new Roundup does not have a label for food producing areas. Anyway, that just kind of, yeah, that's my experience on that, Christy, is don't try to make your root zone shallower. You want a deeper root zone.
Is there a good time of the year to do a soil test? Yes. Yes, there is.
Now.
Now. I think the most important thing is you're not going to do a soil test right after you've amended something. If you've put fertilizer down, if you've done something in the fall to amend your pH, don't test the soil after you amend it. You got to do it before. In fact, that soil test, that's the reason we do it, so that we can know what we should be adding. So is the fall better or the spring? It probably doesn't matter a whole lot as long as you're not testing soil that has just been amended.
One of the things, and Reed talks about this quite a lot too, is in the fall, it doesn't do a lot of good to put down very much nitrogen. Now, a little bit on your lawn is not necessarily a bad thing, but in your gardens, your vegetables and flower beds, you don't want to put down a lot of nitrogen in the fall. And so if you're testing, have your soil tested, the best time is right before you do the amendment, like Tom was talking about. But springtime, the labs get really busy. You've got farmers sending in tests and all that kind of stuff. And so sometimes your response is not going to be as quick. If you wait and you say, okay, well, I want to get my stuff planted out in 2 weeks, and so I better take a soil sample and send it in. By the time it gets there, they get the lab test done and back to you. It may be you wanted to have things planted, you didn't have time to get it down because you didn't get it to them soon enough. So as soon as you can work the soils and you take your soil sample in the spring, it's probably the best time because that's closest to when you're going to be growing the crop. Where can you buy glyphosate now? Well, there are some products like Killzall is glyphosate if you can find that one. But make sure you read the chemistry. You know, if you're looking for glyphosate as a broad spectrum weed control product, make sure you read the label on that. Don't just look at Roundup.
Yeah. And in Bracken's article, he talked about where to get it. You might be able to find it in your local hardware stores, but probably not Home Depot or Lowe's or some of the big box stores, just because they're ordering in new supplies. And so if you go to your local Ace Hardware, you might be able to find it. Maybe just look at the label. And you should be doing that with every chemical that you're buying. You should know what that label says.
Yeah.
And follow it.
Yeah, you should read the label at least 4 times. First of all, you want to read to make sure that it will control what you want it to control. And then you read it to make sure that you have the ability to mix it properly. And then application, you know, how are you applying it properly, and then disposal afterwards. And so you really should be reading that label quite a bit.
Yeah, they're not taking it off the market. They're really removing it from home gardeners, but agricultural applications, that'll still be a very important chemistry that they'll be using.
I think thank goodness we're having all these lawsuits.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we got all these lawsuits. So chemical companies say, well, look, you guys can't use it properly, and so guess what? You don't get to use it anymore.
Yeah, some of the herbicides that they've or some of the active ingredients that they have in the new Roundup is, you know, they're not going to do what glyphosate does. And so really pay attention to what's on that label, and that'll help you make good decisions about how you're going to spray and what you're going to spray.
Now, part of the interesting thing about that the chemistry that's in there is you've got a grass killer, you've got a broadleaf weed killer, and you've got another grass killer, and then you have a burn down product. And for these grass killers and weed killers get into the system, if you go and burn that down before it can actually get into the system and kill the roots, you're kind of destroying the whole purpose in the first place. It just seems kind of silly to me to have that burn down product.
Yep.
Other questions? Exciting gardening times coming up. You know, it's warmed up into the 50 degrees now in eastern Idaho, so I do have.
You guys probably don't have snow like we do up in Ashton still.
No, I think we're pretty well clear of the snow down south of St. Anthony even.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we've been in the 70s at my house a little, not today, it's cold and windy today, but this weekend was gorgeous. There's one more question from Virginia. Is there a good mixture of a 30% acetic acid that kills weeds well?
So the problem with the acetic acid, I mean, it will burn down seedlings. but it does not kill perennials. It's just an acid. It's basically your horticultural vinegar kind of a thing. And so it's it'll burn the tissue. And so if you're doing it on seedlings and you get a good coverage, yes, it'll burn down the seedlings and do a good job. If you're waiting till those plants get up a little bit bigger, you're not going to get nearly as good a coverage on there. The stems stiffen and you're going to get some recovery from those, especially perennials, grasses. It doesn't work. I know when they first started doing that, said, "Oh yeah, it'll kill your quiet grass and your other perennial grass." It burns it down. It does not kill it. Those perennials come back from that. So again, if it's a seedling, yeah, it's fine. But if you've got the rosettes, it's not going to do much good for you. You're not going to get but the seedlings, of course, the seedlings are germinating throughout the summer, and so these and that's part of the problem with a lot of our organic or biological type weed controls is that they're not effective for a long period of time, and that's intentionally so we don't get a hangover of chemistry sitting in the environment for a long time. That's part of the organic appeal. Most of these have a short lifespan, and so to try to get you have to apply it more often. Tilling leaves.
I'm trying to upload the picture I got sent today. Make sure I gave the correct oh yeah, go ahead and answer the tilling leaves question while I try and get this uploaded.
Your thoughts on tilling leaves into the garden, Tom?
I put my leaves into the garden, and it honestly, if you can put the leaves on top and let over the winter and just let it be there, it works pretty good. I'll also compost my leaves and try to get those to break down more. If I can get those leaves broken down, they become a lot better compost.
I don't recognize that seedling. Looks like it's. I don't know. You recognize that, Tom?
All I see is a gray box with.
You have to open it up and zoom in on it. And there's a bunch of little seedlings out there, and I don't quite recognize them. I guess the question is, what was above it last year? What produced all the seeds?
I can't get mine to open up.
Yeah. So I agree with Tom. There's lots of insects and macronutrient shredders, organisms that shred that organic matter, and the earthworms will come up and pull that down. If you allow those things to do the breakdown and pull it down into your soil, that's just as good. Again, as soon as you start trying to till things into the lawn, a couple things is you introduce a lot more oxygen, which increases the burn rate of the organic matter that gets tilled into the soil, so it doesn't stay there quite as long. It gets kind of burned up with the oxygen. And so yeah, I just don't recognize that seedling right off the top of my head, Lena. I'm not sure.
Is that purslane?
No, not purslane. It's too
That
early for
was
purslane.
that was my first guess, and then my second guess was an amaranth, but it kind of looks like sorrel as well. So if someone planted that red veined sorrel or dock, something dock is the other thing they call it, but people like to grow it for salad greens. But it can get kind of weedy.
Let's see, Victoria, it's all over your property. Yeah, I just kind of, it's early for purslane. It's too cold for purslane. So no, it's not that. Besides, I mean, it looks kind of like purslane, but not really. I can usually spot purslane from about 20 feet away. It's not quite right for lamb's quarters.
No, and I don't have any of that coming up yet either. That's I was trying to think, what have I seen in the yard already?
Something this early in the season. I don't know. I have to watch it maybe next week when you got some true leaves on there, Victoria. In 2 weeks, show us another
Send us
picture
some more
when you
pictures.
see if you can get your extension agent to hop over and take a look at them. Yeah, bindweed, the bindweed cotyledons are squarish. They're not that long, narrow cotyledon, so that's not definitely not bindweed. Yep, you stumped the chumps. Yeah, yeah, if you just leveled, that'll take care of that. I suspect it's just some, and it could be well, not where your new house is, but that's a weed. I don't know. I would have to see. It's just I can't recognize the seedling. A lot of times you can tell from the seedling. I can't on this one.
I went through the whole book from Utah State and the whole book from Montana State today, and the purslane was the closest looking thing. So I don't know. Pot up some for us and see what it is.
I do have a book somewhere on identifying the seedlings. If you go into
Is it in your office? I could go look.
it'd be a second drawer down on the left-hand side.
Okay, I'll look tomorrow.
Yeah, it should be in there. I almost wonder if it's I don't think it's not, it doesn't quite look right for pigweed, but it looks more like a knotweed to me.
Yeah, it could be.
Anyway. Yeah, so now it's time to be out looking, and if it's a plant that you don't want, or you're pretty certain you don't want it, then now is the time to control it when they're small.
Yep.
A lot easier to control as seedlings than when they're big. Yeah, even at this stage, flame weeding would do it. You could wipe those out with flame weeding of those seedlings and do a good job on that.
And that's fun too.
Yeah. The thing about flame weeding, you don't have to burn things to a crisp. All you got to do is go over that quickly, and you'll see that those leaves or the cotyledons, they'll kind of slick up. When they've done that, you've killed the plants, the seedlings. Doesn't work as good on perennials, but yeah. So read the label, Evelyn. Read the temperature label. Typically, your response, some herbicides, they say it should be 45, 50 degrees or warmer. Some of them say it shouldn't be over 75, 85 degrees. It shouldn't be any higher than that. And so you have to kind of read the label. It's hard for us to say, yeah, well, this one, so you have to read the label on that. The grass killer herbicide, typically, as long as it's above freezing, it'll work, but it'll be slower because the plant's growing slower.
The Palmer amaranth, I think, is what they're talking about in the Farm and Ranch News.
Yeah, that or the water hemp.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple of, and they probably are. We've got some around here. They travel there through several places through Idaho, that several weeds that have been identified as being resistant to herbicides. And a lot of times it's not just one herbicide, it's several herbicides. April is when Robert said for grass killer. Yeah, well, as long as the plants are growing, then you're going to have pretty good control. For some of the insecticides, especially the delayed dormant, that's pretty temperature sensitive, and so we have to be careful with that. But so, does it do anything for bindweed? Yeah, it kills out all the competition. So the flame weeding does not kill perennial weeds. And so if you have perennial bindweed that comes up, it will knock it down. It'll kill that top, but the roots, it'll keep coming back from the roots. Now, if you're getting the seedling and you flame weed the seedling, yes, it'll kill the seedlings. It takes about 21 days for bindweed to become perennialized. So it pops up, it grows, and up until that point, you can pull it up and that would kill it. But if you let it go until it becomes perennialized, and then you pull it up, you're going to have regrowth from the roots. So flame weeding can be a problem. Well, it's effective on young small plants. It's not as effective as they get bigger, and it's definitely not effective on perennial plants. Yeah, Palmer amaranth and water hemp were the ones. There are others. There are some kochias, strains of kochia that are also resistant to herbicides. A number of plants
Wild
that have
oats.
become resistant. So
Yeah, wild oats is another one. It's a big
Yep.
one.
The flame weeding has been the only thing that has killed kochia for me. Whatever I've got is like a super plant. And now this will be our 6th summer in this house. I finally only have a few little seedlings coming up. So,
yeah,
but I've tried every herbicide. I've tried everything on it, and the flame weeding is the only thing that'll control it, other than a hoe when they're little. But a lot of it's in gravel, so the hoe is hard.
yeah. Yeah, but that first year was pretty discouraging, wasn't it, Lena?
Yeah, about how this year's been with bowls.
Yeah. You just have to keep after it, keep after it.
The bowls too. That's on my list for this week, is to start filling in all the trenches in my yard.
Yeah. Okay, well, it's 8 o'clock. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Great information on your soil testing, understanding that soil test. All right, thanks everybody, and we'll talk to you in a couple weeks.